Well, President Trump is on his first international trip next week. Starting today, he's heading over to all sorts of countries, including Saudi Arabia, Italy, and Belgium. He's set to propose a plan to balance the federal budget over 10 years. Let's bring in Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and look who's here, Fox News contributor, Judith Miller. Good to see you, Judith.
Nice to see you, Liz.
Now, with all the turmoil in D.C. swampland, all the gotcha politics, can Trump get cooperation on the budget? I hear the Democrats are threatening a shutdown.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, the hope of this trip is that we could get off of the Jim Comey firing and back onto the nation's agenda, such as, tax reform, regulatory overhaul. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we have too many signs that the resist is kind of gearing up for the summer. They're going to be putting extra pressure on Democrats and Republicans at home in their base. And you have this continuing onslaught of investigations on the Hill, both in the House and the Senate, and now, of course, Robert Mueller. So it's going to be very hard to focus attention yet again on the things that really got Donald Trump elected.
Yeah, it's a good point you make there, Judith. Here's a statistic. More than half the time in the last 15 years, Congress did not do what taxpayers hired them to do, issue a budget. They were doing continuing resolutions.
Right.
What is going on in Washington, D.C. with the president trying to get stuff done and they're pushing back? It really is a swamp.
It's a swamp, but also, Liz, I think the president has a particular problem, and also, by the way, among Republicans, and it's because his growth estimates are really high. He assumes that if he's able to do the regulatory reform, to lower regulations, the number of them, and to rationalize the tax system, we're going to have a lot of growth. And the growth projections are way beyond what the CBO is projecting.
Yeah, but the CBO's really often been off, right?
Outrageously high.
Yeah, but the CBO's been off by hundreds of billion annually. But
there is very little evidence to support the president's projected numbers as well. Now, this is a very solid economic team, but a lot of Republicans, such as Mark Sanford of South Carolina, are saying, whoa, wait a minute, we're not going to be able to pay for all this with huge tax cuts and a 10% increase in defense spending. We're already got $54 billion scheduled in discretionary funding for environment, for a non-discretionary, for discretionary funding. So I see a lot of pushback on by people in home districts. I think it's going to be very hard for the president to get this.
I hear what you're saying. Judith, you've been a veteran D.C. watcher. The problem with D.C. is not gridlock, it's incumbency. It's incumbency. It's people who want to protect their vested interests there.
Exactly.
And, the issue with D.C., what the president's trying to do, he's saying he wants to cut government federal pensions that are pretty rich. He's not going to touch Social Security, Medicare, the driver of a lot of the deficit, as we know. But, he's trying to do things like infrastructure projects. I mean, it would seem that both sides of the aisle would be for that.
Yeah, they would be, but the president's talking about $1 trillion infrastructure plan, and I got to tell you, Liz, we live in New York. You know that we have about $1 trillion of necessary spending on our infrastructure, which is kind of falling apart now. If you've been in Penn Station lately and waited for a train, you know what's going on. So this $1 trillion figure, which sounds so high, is actually very low. And so a lot of these projections are just not being taken seriously by the men and women who have to go back and fight for re-election in 2018. And that's what I would look for.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
2018.
I hear, it's a great point that you make.
If Democrats are able to take back the House, and that's what they're talking about now, you can kiss this economic program goodbye.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'll tell you something. Jamie Dimon, J.P. Morgan Chase said, we haven't had a new airport in New York City in like 20 or 30 years. China's built something like 70 of them in that time frame. So I hear what you're saying, Judith. Again, swamp land is going full tilt right now. And when, people want tax reform, they want more money in their pockets. They don't like what's going on in D.C. at all.
Exactly. They want change, and that's very hard to produce in a system like ours, which is really skewed in favor of the balances on the checks.